Jack of all, master of none.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining. Today we're going to install a little bit of drywall, and I'm just going to go over a few things to keep in mind while we're doing this. And I don't know if I've mentioned before, I do all these videos while I'm on the fly, so I'm not going to do an inventory count of what you need for tools. Just stick with the video, pay attention to what I'm using, and then hopefully my situation will help your situation. So we're going to put a flat piece here. We're also going to put another piece here. That's going to have to blend together. Otherwise, up here we're going to have a little bit of a lip. We'll use some corner metal up there and get a nice flat finish. First thing to keep in mind, we're going to make sure that we have proper backing. So these studs look like they're about 16 inches on center, which is standard. In the corner here, that's not designed for drywall backing. What you can see here is that we just have a single stud on either section, and even so, this stud is tucked in behind this one a little bit. So you have less than 1.5 inches here, but you have a full 1.5 inches here. So what we want is to have a full 1.5 inches at least to secure one panel on. And let me show you something if you can't quite visualize what I'm about to say. And in this case, we're using 5/8 inch drywall. That's just what we have handy. You can use 1/2 inch here. But if we were to secure that there, we don't really have any backing for the next panel that's going to sit this way. So we're going to want to put another stud here for backing, so we can then put that one on. And because that one's tucked in behind this one, I'm going to run a full sheet here and put our backing there, and then continue with the next piece. So for this guy, I'm going to pop that one in, and you don't have to worry about it being tight. If you have a couple pieces handy, you can even just kind of pop them in and sandwich them up against each other. It doesn't have to be structural. We're not supporting any load. We're just providing backing for our and because of that, I'm just going to put 3 screws in. So another thing to keep in mind when installing this drywall, you want to make sure that your edges are plumb, are straight. What we're going to do here is just make sure everything is that's close enough. We'll take that. Because if this was way out and we cut a square piece of drywall to insert there, we're going to see the gap. And so what we can do is account for that. If we do have a wall that tends to be or is a little out of plumb, we can cut the drywall accordingly so we have a nice fit. Also, we're going to do this over here. That's pretty straight, and this wall here pretty straight. So we can go ahead and square our corner cuts on the drywall and have one nice rectilinear piece to install on both sections. So we're going to start with this piece here. We're going to go ahead and measure. We're going to go, since we're putting corner metal here, and we've got this little bit of drywall poking out, we're going to measure to the inside of that. So that is, at its narrowest point, 13. At its widest is 13.25, and that's fine. We're just going to do it at 13. Any difference, any gap is going to be covered by our corner bead, or we can cover it with mud. Not worth the time trying to exactly fit a piece in there. We can make it work. So what I'm going to do for that piece, I also didn't mention, that's 36 inches tall. So instead of cutting this way, we're going to have this ugly notch out of this piece, I'm going to do one nice slice off that sheet. That way we have more continuous surface area, I guess, for lack of a better word, almost a full sheet instead of one with a big notch out of it. And also too, when we butt up to the existing drywall, we have our tapered end that we could put there and make for a nice transition with our mudding and our taping. So if you guys haven't been instructed before, cutting drywall is pretty straightforward. Just make a measurement on both ends. This is the way I tend to do it. There are methods people use in production drywall where they just, for instance, with their measuring tape a certain distance, hook it on their knife, and then cut down. But we're doing a precise cut. We're not in a hurry. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, I already made the line, and you can mark it with your pencil so when you're cutting you know you're not deviating, and you just go down and score the drywall. This is 5/8, so it's going to take a couple times, and make sure you have plenty of utility blades handy, because if you're cutting a lot of drywall it's going to dull those blades pretty quick. And so just score it a couple times. And then, hopefully you guys can see this okay, stand the sheet up and kind of bump your knee right about where that mark is and pull the end in. Now you just cut inside that groove or that back fold, and you free your piece of drywall. And we're going to make sure we have a number 2 Phillips bit. Because we're using 5/8 inch drywall, we're also going to make sure that we have 1 5/8 screws instead of 1¼ inch. We need a little bit more grab into the wood for the heavier pieces. And we're just going to pop this one in. And then we're just going to go ahead and screw it off. If you've watched one of my other videos, I do cover general screw spacing for drywall. Typically for the studs in the center of the board, it's going to be like 12 inches on center. For the perimeters, it'll be like around 6, maybe 8. Definitely check your local code and make sure you're doing it properly. Quick reminder here, guys, about the depth of your screws. You want it just barely below that surface of the drywall, so you're not penetrating that outer paper layer. It's just curving in around the circumference of the screw head. Also, we got our spacing. It's about 6 to 8 inches. We're just eyeballing it because it's not really that structural. We're not serving a huge purpose here. We're just filling that in. And it should be noted, stay away from screwing into the corners. Very brittle area. So if you were to screw at the top as well, you would want one about here and about there. And that's how you turn those corners. Definitely don't screw those. They'll break, they'll crumble. Now we're gonna do everything the same for this larger piece. All right, so just a couple situational things to consider. We have corner metal going on the top, right? So we don't need that taper to be on the top, because then we're going to have to fill that in with more mud. And also considering we do have base trim that's going to go on here, I put the tapered edge down because that taper is going to get filled in with the baseboard. I don't have to use as much mud. And we know that this fits. You don't have to worry about the corner either. That's also getting edge metal. Before we pop this up, we're going to make sure that we give our studs and backing a nice mark the whole way through, just to make things a little bit easier so we don't wind up with a bunch of screw holes on our board trying to find the stud. Now we're going to secure this the same way, and yeah. A lot of times if you're drywalling in an area where there's going to be water or plumbing somewhere, you want to get the drywall off the ground. That's not the case here. But I did cut it a little bit short just to make my numbers a little bit even for one, and to get it off the ground just a little bit. Doesn't hurt. So you can see here I'm working alone. This is a pretty big piece. So just below the center of where we're going to be attaching that board to that top plate, just below that I'm going to start a screw. I'm going to put a flat bar down here. I'm going to try and do this holding the camera stand because I'm too lazy to get my headset or my chest set. And I'm just going to pop that up with my foot just enough to bring that to the right height. I'm going to drive that in. Perfect. We're going to come over here. And we're going to do the same thing. We get the flat bar under, just like so. I'm going to put some pressure on that with my, actually, you guys get a front row seat there. Put a little pressure on with my foot. Bring that board to height. And voila, you can screw the rest of it off. All right, everybody, next up is the corner metal. And unfortunately, we incurred a couple kinks in transportation, but it's no worries. We can flatten that out and make it work. We're also going to use some sheet metal cutters. I'm going to go ahead and lay this in place. I'm going to push it all the way up to where it needs to be. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to make a little notch. Boom. Come around. Make another little notch. Boom. That didn't work. Okay. We're going to go ahead and cut that through. And go ahead and twist to break that center. It's a lot easier than with these little guys going in and cutting that center. You tend to bend the metal even more. And so that's set. And so what I'm going to go through and do, you don't want to screw this thing heavily. You just want to put a few strategic screws where they need to be to keep it flat. So I'm going to go ahead and push in. And I can see that that's flush down there, that's flush down there. There's no sense in putting screws there, right? And that can go all the way back to maybe about right here. I'll put a screw down here. You don't need the pre-drilled holes. You can pop one right through. And you do want to come and look down on it from each angle. Make sure that that screw head is flush behind the actual corner projection, and it is, so that's deep enough. You can see we have a little bit of bounce up here. We're going to do the same thing, but on top. I'm going to put a screw a little bit off so I don't hit the other screw. Just enough to keep it flush underneath this corner, because this corner pops up and out. It's a little tiny bit rounded. So when you go and spread mud, everything will be flush with this corner. So that's good. And we're going to do the same thing, working our way down. We're going to do the same thing on the corner there, and the same thing on the outer corner there. And that's about it for the rough install, guys. Definitely like and subscribe below. Tune into some of my other videos if you want to see mudding techniques, placing the fiberglass mesh, and some texture as well. I have pointers for all those in my other videos, and don't hesitate to check them out. Thank you so much for joining.